According to reporting by the Daily Poster, the Koch Foundation has financed legal groups in court to end prohibitions against evictions during COVID. At the same time, the Kochs have made large real estate investments, including in Amherst Holdings, Ladder Capital Corp, SmartRent, and many more.
Joining us to discuss is founder of the Daily Poster and editor-at-large of Jacobin and former senior advisor to the Bernie Sanders campaign, the one and only David Sirota. Great to see you, sir.
Good to see you, David.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, just break down the story for us, David.
Sure. So there are these eviction bans. The CDC put an eviction moratorium in place during COVID to try to prevent people from being thrown out on the street in the pandemic. And there has been a legal battle in a series of federal courts to try to strike down those eviction bans. And those cases have been brought by a trio of groups that have been gotten a lot of money from the Koch Foundation, about $7.7 million to those groups, those three groups that have been pushing these cases. And some of these cases have been successful. Some of them may go to a higher court level, so we'll see what happens with them. But they have been somewhat successful so far. At the same time, Koch Industries, which is not typically thought of as a real estate company, Koch Industries, which is the privately held Koch company, has suddenly been making major investments in the real estate sector, including in companies that have a financial stake in the residential rental sector. So $200 million to Amherst, as you mentioned, Amherst, which owns a huge single-family rental business, $30+ million to Ladder Capital. Ladder Capital also is invested in the residential real estate sector. So the question then becomes how much is the Koch Foundation money, the tax-exempt foundation money, advancing and advocating for a political agenda that could eventually serve directly the investments of the Koch for-profit empire, the corporate empire?
Yeah, well, I can already hear and see the Koch Foundation pushback in my inbox, David. So what do they have to say in terms of their response to this story?
Well, they didn't comment to us.
Yeah.
They wouldn't answer our comment. But my guess is what they would argue is that Charles Koch believes in the so-called free market, and the CDC guidelines and moratorium is against the free market right of landlords to throw people out of their homes during a pandemic. But the point is that no matter which way you take this story, the point is that you have a situation in which the political agenda is serving the investment interests of the corporate empire. And then the question becomes, what's the right thing to do here? I mean, should federal courts really be striking down a CDC guideline that is designed to prevent mass evictions? I mean, I would argue that's a bad policy. That wouldn't be a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, David, there's actually a lot of different pieces to the story. There's the eviction ban piece, which, Congress passed rental funding assistance. States and localities have had very difficult time effectively distributing that money, getting into the hands of people who need it so that they can pay their rent and get current. And, I don't care about the giant corporate landlords, but there are some small-time landlords who have really suffered during this as well. You also have, on the other side of things, housing prices have been pushed up insanely. And what we were led to believe was that, this was all because people are making different choices and PMC is moving and they want to move out to the suburb and they want more space. So there's been this huge housing boom. That's part of the story. But part of the story is permanent capital buying up the housing stock and driving the prices sky high. And I didn't realize that Koch Industries was a part of that story.
100%. I mean, that is one of the biggest stories in the housing sector. The giant institutional investors moving into the residential real estate sector, buying up huge swaths of that sector, and of course, raising the rents. I've seen some stats about how Wall Street and institutional investor-owned rental housing has seen bigger rental increases than the overall market. And that's because obviously at the back end you have investors who are demanding bigger and bigger returns. Now you could argue, listen, that's capitalism, right? That's what happens in an unregulated capitalistic system. But that's the whole point of the eviction bans. They're designed to say that at least in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of an economic crisis, we can't just allow landlords in a mass way to throw people out on the street.
Yeah, that's exactly right, David. And we've chronicled this, you have as well, about the large grab up by private equity and more. That's part of the reason why a lot of these people want the eviction crisis to end, so they can go and buy real estate from all the landlords who have also not had assistance right now.
Absolutely. And I think that's what Koch Industries is actually, from an investment perspective, that's what they're getting in on. Koch Industries, like other institutional investors, sees a huge opportunity in the housing market. And I think, honestly, we have to take a step back and ask ourselves, is it really a good thing for our society, for the basic shelter, right, a human need, housing, to become such a focus of speculation and investment and profit taking? Like, where does that end? Where does that lead us?
Yeah, I mean, it really kills that conception of like the young couple just getting started in the starter home. Can't afford a starter home around here and in many places in the country. And that a significant part of that rise in prices is because of that speculation that you're talking about here. David, great reporting as always. Great to see you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. More rising for you after this.